There's really nothing real. There is no real. And that's what's called the postmodern mentality.
I couldn't resist the worst racist remark.
The adventure of life justifies its suffering.
I don't want to see him having political succubus with goblins.
We'll do it live.
Okay. Is Trump going to have babies with a goblin?
We'll do it live.
And turn against us like Darth Vader?
Do it live.
Now listen, you
the right of calling names
you in your goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
I was going to have a guest speaker, but the person I had invited in died.
Some level of masochism.
Should we introduce ourselves first?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah, you're
Helen,
and this is Odium Symposium. So the premise of this podcast is that each episode, one of us will have some historical text, usually marginal enough that you might not have heard of the author, and we'll present it to the other and we'll talk about it. So kind of the way this podcast came about is I was at a community organizing event in the park, and there was a table with free books. And one of the books was a book of misogynist essays called Man Against Woman by Charles Nieder. And I saw this book on the table and I was just like locked in, like instantly. I knew I had to read this, but I had to like be normal about it, you know? So I took something else too. I don't even remember what it was. I took it home and I started reading these essays, and I was really like astonished by the variety of points of view from which misogyny could come, and some other common themes that I noticed that maybe we'll get into on future episodes or this one. And also how much fun it would be to like just write something or say something about these essays. So I started writing down little snippets, and I didn't really have a way to put them out there. And so I suggested a podcast where we do this kind of like exploration of random misogynist or otherwise bigoted texts. Helen, you were very enthusiastic about this.
Yeah, I mean, I basically just got a message. You were like, hey, what do you think of this idea for a podcast? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. I think what I recognize that I've also had those impulses of like, oh, this is a really messed up book. I have to read this immediately and see what the hell's going on. And more generally, I think, you know, as we've talked more in prepping, it seems like we both have this tendency to watch or read or find out about just like really messed up contemporary examples of this as well. So like I've, you know, watched a bunch of really terrible YouTube content that I'm going to inflict on you at some point. I mean, I think also part of this is just, you know, but there were definitely times when I was watching like, oh, I need to watch, you know, this clip, and a friend would be like, Helen, why are you watching that? Like, that's just straightforwardly like self-harm. And I'm like, no, I need to know, like, what are these people saying, right? There's just certainly like turning over rocks and seeing what like gross thing is growing underneath them. Is sort of one of the main impulses that I immediately was like, yeah, I definitely want to do this podcast.
Yeah. And, well, you know, while there's an element of the unhealthy to it for us, like definitely for the listener, this is a totally healthy thing and they should be really into it.
Yeah, it's good for you. It's informative. We're educational. No, but I really do think one of the things that going into a lot of the sources always reminds me is that the sort of ideas behind a lot of these are sort of simultaneously like more sophisticated and also stupider than we maybe usually think they are, right? And so as you really dive into like, okay, I mean, I'm just thinking about some of the clips that I, you know, used in that intro theme song, right? Like William F. Buckley is regarded as this pillar of, or was, I guess, regarded as this pillar of conservative intellectualism, right? And people were like, well, you know, I guess you could say he was doing politics the right way, right? But like, he was someone that people said, okay, you know, conservatism can have a lot of bigotry. It can have a lot of these kinds of like angry, reactionary tendencies in it. But there is a real intellectual core to this, you know, conservative idea, which, you know, I don't want to say necessarily there's nothing of value in conservatism, right? But people would point to William F. Buckley as like, okay, this is the intellectual guy. This is the guy who's taking things seriously. And then you kind of dig underneath what he's saying. And so much of it was just profoundly racist, or something that we would recognize now as like, oh yeah, that's completely incorrect. And so I think it's worth going back and saying like, okay, reevaluate some of these guys that we accept as like, oh yeah, that was just like the time or whatever. I think it's better to understand like what is really in sort of our ideological groundwater, I guess.
Yeah, these people have roles and they're engaged in a project. And so, for example, with Buckley, you talk about how people reacted to him as a sign that there was something worthwhile in conservatism, and also pretty bluntly, like that just was his role, to be the person who is there to contrast with the nuts, while not actually having such a different message from them. It's a quality of his person, but it's also a quality of a project that he was a part of.
Yeah. So I guess, we don't want to do the theory for the podcast, right out the gate, the first episode. So I'll leave some, we can leave that there because we don't want to tell everyone everything they're going to hear already. But
yeah, I only get like one brain cell collision every week. So we do need to meter these out a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess the other thing is we're assuming editing this goes smoothly enough and we release this. It will be released around or hopefully on the birthday of friend of the pod, Charlie Kirk. But yeah, we talked about we don't want these to feel too like topical, so that somebody listening to it a couple months later is going to be like, oh, I don't remember what the news cycle was that day, so I'm not going to engage with the podcast. So we don't need to get too much into all the specifics, but I think it's worth pointing out, like, Charlie Kirk was also this guy that William F. Buckley was, right? Like, he also was this figure, and I think that he was more divisive, and I think it's telling that in all these clips where people are commemorating him and talking about what a wonderful, thoughtful guy he was, like, they're never quoting him, right? But yeah, I think we need to take a moment to honor our fallen comrade, Charlie Kirk, right? Who definitely is going to provide some content for us in future episodes, though not today.
Absolutely.
So yeah, what are your plans for Charlie Kirk Remembrance Day?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to knock back a few beers with a fellow member of Antifa or two, explicitly in celebration of Charlie Kirk's life.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to hang out with the founder of Antifa, in fact, but now his girlfriend is in jail, so there's a whole thing with that.
Yeah, I think he's a little busy at the moment.
There I go, making extremely topical jokes that somebody in 6 months is not going to know what the heck I'm talking about.
6 hours. 6 hours.
Exactly.
Okay, there's actually some resonance here with today's essays, so maybe we should get into that.
Okay, let's jump into the essays. We've rambled for long enough.
So we've got 2 essays today by Stephen Leacock.
Okay, I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah, he's not so well known now, which is, kind of part of the tie-in. So I want to save like more biographical details for when we're in between the 2 pieces. But I'll tell you right now that he was a Canadian economist, political theorist, and humorist. And the first of these 2 essays is from 1945. So this is the title.
Are witty women attractive to men? This is an interesting, difficult one, right? Because we both know that like women aren't funny. So this is kind of like, imagine this crazy world where women are funny.
Right, okay, and here's his answer.
Having been asked to answer the question, are witty women attractive to men? I answered decidedly no. Okay, so that's sort of interesting theoretical knowledge, right? In the world where a woman might be funny, it would actually be unattractive to men. So that's good.
Right.
It's good that we're not, right? It's good that we're not funny.
This is one of his humorous essays. And
I wasn't picking up on that at all.
Yeah. Well, it might be a little clearer when we look at the first paragraph.
Okay, strong opening. So here we go. Slaves murmur to one another in their chains. They whisper what they think of their masters. In the same way, the generality of men, being enslaved by women, whisper when in safety what they think. Slave number 1 in his club murmurs to slave number 2 that women have no sense of humor. Slave number 2 agrees, and slave number 3, overhearing from his armchair, says quite boldly, they certainly have not, after which quite a colloquy ensues among the slaves. But when the wife of slave number 1 asks at dinner what was the talk at the club, he answers, oh, nothing much. Yet his inmost feeling is that women have no sense of humor, and if a woman is witty, she has somehow come by it wrongly. He daren't speak right out, but I will speak for him.
A big thing with like reactionary centrists these days is just expressing your own sense of like victimhood and persecution in a way that like could not be more at odds with reality. And I guess that's also a huge part of the right. It's just, you know, we pay a little more attention to the reactionary centrist arguments because they're supposed to be taken seriously.
I think we're going to have this a lot, where it's hard to even know sort of where to tackle this, because both the assumptions are wrong and the conclusions are wrong and the argumentation is bad, right? But there's so much here. Maybe I didn't catch the humor because as a woman reading it, right, I don't have the sense of humor to really, you know, capture it in the reading. But to me, this is just like, it's total nonsense, right? Like, okay, slave 1 and slave 2 are like hanging out at the club, right? What are the wives of slave 1 and slave 2 doing? Like, they're at home making them dinner, right? Like,
right.
When the wife of slave number 1 asks at dinner, like, who made that dinner, right? So like, you're imagining this tableau in which like the slaves are all hanging out and smoking cigars and complaining about their bitch masters. Meanwhile, the masters are hard at work at home, keeping the house.
Mm-hmm.
Undoubtedly, if you presented this guy with like, hey, this like slave thing is really messed up, like his answer would be like, chill out, lady, it's just a joke. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? But it's like, so it's not even that I want to say like, oh, this is profoundly racist, although it is, you know, not to in any way excuse how like horrifically racist this is, but it's also just so lame. Like,
yeah, it's pretty weak stuff.
Yeah.
Also, I want to highlight these slaves are talking in their clubs. So in this era, well, clubs exist, and also they're specifically male spaces. The women that are supposedly their masters are literally not allowed to come in here.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to ask also, what year was this written?
This is from 1945.
Okay, at least we're sort of post-abolition in the US. Worldwide, we still have slavery, and we still have, we're still talking about an era of like Jim Crow laws in the South. And
well, remember, he is in Canada, and his Canadianness is actually important to him.
Okay.
I don't know that actually shows up in this essay, but it's true.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I'm going to end up being a little American-centric sometimes maybe, but part of what I want to just point out here is like, you know, we're talking about kind of in the global supply chain and in the way that, right, he has access to all of the material goods that, you know, sustain his daily life, right, involves quite a fair amount of slave labor. Still would today, but more so in the 40s than it does today. Yeah, especially in that context, to then be like, oh, we're the real slaves.
Yeah.
It's just not funny. I just don't get where the humor is, Sarah. Like, I really I'm struggling to see.
Well, I think the humor is precisely the inversion of reality, because it's going to be totally clear later on that he does not think women are actually the masters.
Okay, yeah. That's good. Okay,
yeah.
Let's see the next clip then.
He goes on to discuss this question of, are witty women attractive? And he throws some sops to women here that I mostly haven't excerpted. For example, he says that, okay, well, it's true that witty women aren't attractive, but witty people in general aren't attractive. Or, you know, sometimes men just find witty women unattractive because of their own egotism, like that sort of thing. And here's a little clip from that sequence of sops. They're talking about a kind of man who actually might be into a witty woman.
Okay. There is a particularly decent type of man who finds it restful not to have to talk. When in his youth he meets a girl who talks all the time, that exactly suits him. He doesn't have to say anything. 10 years later, you'll see them enter a drawing room together. The host says to the man, looks like an early winter. And he answers, certainly does. The host says, have a cocktail. And he answers, certainly will. By that time, his wife has started in on the conversation. He doesn't have to talk anymore. People commonly call this type an adoring husband. He isn't. His wife is just a sort of fire screen. The real adoring husband overtalks his wife, overdominates her, pays with unexpected presents for easy forgiveness of his ill temper, and he never knows that he adored her till it is too late, because now she cannot hear it.
I am completely unable to tell what level of irony that passage is operating on.
This is on such a level of irony that it's just, yeah, it's hard to know what to make of this, because, like, you know, if we're thinking about this as like a classic example of the like grievance essay, right, where it's like there's just this like overwhelming sense of grievance that's being sort of aired by the author, you need to have the section where it's like, okay, some people might tell you that like they don't have this grievance, but actually there's something wrong with them, right? Because like this also happens whenever you have these sorts of like articles where it's like cancel culture has gone too far, blah, 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 right? You need to include like all of the people who are like, well, actually, it's just not that big of a deal. You need to include like a little thing about why like actually those people have a problem, right? And so here it's like, okay, you know, women are not funny. No one wants to hear women talking. And it's like, okay, what about the like plentiful examples of relationships where the woman talks?
Oh, well, those are beta cucks.
Exactly, right? You need to like have the like, yeah, but it's not that he loves his wife, right? If he loved his wife, he would be domineering and he would have an ill temper that he would need to pay back with presents, right? Like,
right. Well, I mean, it's so funny to me. Like he's saying like the real loving husband treats his wife like shit and then feels bad about it when she dies.
Yeah.
I can't help wondering if he's just like projecting himself in there as the positive example. Like he's somehow aware that this is his personality. Yeah, rough.
I'm ready for the next clip, I think.
Okay. This is the last bit that I clipped from the SOP section.
There is also the most obvious qualification to be made in regard to women's sense of humor in general and women's wit in particular. That, of course, individual exceptions, however conspicuous, do not set aside the general rule. There is no doubt that at least one of the most brilliant humorists of the hour in America is a woman. Many would say the most brilliant. Such a faculty for reproducing by simple transcription the humor of social dialogue has, it seems to me, never been surpassed. But one swallow doesn't make a summer, though one drop of ink may make all humor kin.
So I don't know what humorist he's actually referring to, or why, despite being Canadian, he is talking about humorists in America. I have to guess that's Dorothy Parker.
I would also guess it's Dorothy Parker, I was going to say.
He's kind of doing exactly what you were talking about with the previous one, where he has to point to like plentiful exceptions and then be like, okay, but don't forget, those don't count. Because I just don't want them to.
The last one, at least, there was like a theory of why it doesn't count, right? Because he's saying like, actually, it's not an exception, right? Like the last one is like, actually, men who don't interrupt their wife, you know, men who aren't, you know, constantly complaining about their bitch wife all the time. It's not that they actually love their wives, because the guy who like yells at his wife and calls her a bitch and then brings her flowers and then yells at her again, like, actually, he just doesn't know how much he loves his wife. But when she dies, he'll feel sad about it, right? Here, there's not even like, there's nothing there, right? Like, oh, you have to remember that one swallow doesn't make a summer. I mean, he's just saying like one swallow doesn't make a summer, though one drop of ink may make all humor kin. It's just completely irrelevant.
It is.
Like,
it is.
He's just saying like, oh, well, remember, if you drop ink on text, you can't read it. It's an idiom that sounds nice, but is actually like, doesn't mean anything in relation to the thing he's saying. And this is like such a classic move for this kind of guy. Like, you're out of things to say, so you just like reach for like a bon mot instead of actually having anything to say.
So he goes on to introduce some arguments that he wants to counterpose himself to about modern liberated women who smoke and curse. And there's the question like, is it possible that these women can actually be funny because they're so different from the previous generations?
There are no new girls, no new women. Your grandmother was a devil of a clip half a century before you were born. You telemark on skis. She cut ice in a cutter. You only knew her when she was wrinkled and hobbling, reading the epistle to the Thessalonians. Well, he's wrong here because my grandmother is Jewish. You only knew her when she was wrinkled and hobbling, reading the epistle to the Thessalonians in a lace cap and saying she didn't know what the world was coming to. The young have always been young, and the old always old. Men and women don't change. It took thousands, uncounted thousands of years to make them what they are. The changes that you think you see lie just on the surface. You could wash them away with soap and hot water.
Okay, so just some basic gender essentialism here. And also just kind of denying the possibility of change in society. This guy lived through, for example, the introduction of women's suffrage. And what he's claiming here is that none of that mattered.
This part to me is like, there's something interesting here because I think there is a point to be said about the illusory sense of young people being more radical. And
I agree. I think this is definitely the closest he gets to like making a really good or interesting point in this essay.
I've definitely known people who kind of fit this pattern of when they're young, they're like, oh yeah, like everything's new but it's sort of always understood that like, okay, that's something you do when you're young, and then when you get old, it's time to like put away childish things, right? This is a real idea that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's such a leap to go from that to no social change can happen. You know, any change you could see for the role of men and women in society is completely superficial. Because also, like, it took uncounted thousands of years to make them what they are, even 1,000 years ago. And we're going to look at some examples of this eventually. But, like, even 1,000 years ago, the role of men and women in society, and, like, even if we're narrowing to, you know, the sort of Western European society that I think most closely evolved into the society that this guy's writing in, profoundly different ideas about the ways that men and women behave. This is a part where it's like dangerous. You start reading and you're like, okay, yeah, there's a point here, but you kind of, it's just wrong. Like, he takes this point, there's like nugget of something real, and then he just like turns it into like, therefore, it's crazy to think anyone can change ever, and everyone is the same. Even this notion of like, your grandmother was like this, I think he's just projecting what his grandmother was like. There are certain ways in which my grandmother, in fact, does say, like, oh, I don't know what the world is coming to. But there's a lot of ways in which she was doing things differently than her mother. And actually, both, I mean, I'm thinking about one of my grandmothers has passed away, but both of them, like, lived very different lives than their parents' lives and set out in the world to actually, like, shape their own life in a way that was, like, not really possible for their parents. So this is like, even if he's projecting his own grandmother onto this, like, I doubt this is true of his grandmother. Like, I feel bad for his grandmother now that, like, he just thinks she's some woman who, like, all she did was, like, read the Bible and complain about where the world is going to.
Okay, well, all of this intellectual stance is going to be completely consistent as we go on. So don't worry about that.
That's the only thing I care about, right? I can excuse any kind of bigotry as long as there's intellectual consistency, right?
Yeah, I'm lying. He's going to contradict himself like every other paragraph. The next clips here, I want to emphasize to you that this is directly after the previous one. Okay? There's no space in between these.
But now I'll tell you another thing. All this new era of ours of emancipated women and women in offices and women the same as men is just a passing phase, and the end of it is already in sight. A great social disaster fell on the world. I feel like I need to be reading this in Jordan Peterson voice because he's Canadian. A great social disaster fell on the world. The industrial age built up great cities where people lived, crowded into little boxes, where there was no room for children, where women's work vanished because they were dispossessed, where national population was kept going by additions from God knows where, and national safety was jeopardized by the increasing scarcity of our own people. We had a close shave of it.
Okay, so he's got a new topic now.
Yeah, this is just total, like, we're not even talking about whether women are funny or not, which is funny because he starts by saying, like, are funny women attractive? And then immediately
Right.
it's not
like,
actually...
How have we gotten here? What happened?
Like, I just remembered, like, that's the thesis. Okay, thesis statement. Funny women are not attractive. And now we're arguing, like, the emancipation of women. Like, this is Jordan Peterson shit. The emancipation of women is the dragon of chaos that's going to swallow Western society, and we need to, like, go back to our Jungian myths about, right? Like...
Well, it's not just that. He got distracted in the middle of the paragraph, and he summoned a different dragon.
Yeah.
Like, what is this business about the national population being kept going by additions from God knows where? Our own people? Like, what are we talking about here?
I'm just, like, very confused how we got to this point, because first it's funny women aren't attractive, but that's actually even just the thesis statement, because immediately he goes into women aren't funny, right? Which is different than saying funny women aren't attractive. And then he's saying women who talk, whether it's funny or not, are not attractive. And men who like listening to women talk, it's because they don't like talking themselves. And so it's a flaw.
See, this is why I wanted to emphasize that this excerpt, that there's no, like, space or separation between this and the previous one. I wanted the suddenness of the swerve to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, this is starting to break my brain. And it's only episode 1. I can't have a psychotic break episode 1, Sarah. Like, I can't.
Okay, wait, let me give you a pop quiz here.
Okay.
What could "we had a close shave of it" possibly mean? Draw on all your knowledge of Stephen Leacock thus far acquired.
Okay, so he's Canadian misogynist. National safety was jeopardized by the increasing scarcity of our own people. So if this is written in 1945, it's hard to read, like, the obvious sort of political historical event.
Was there something going on at the time?
Is the end of World War II. But it's so hard to, like, I just can't figure out.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm so excited for you to find out the answer. Here it is. Here's the next excerpt.
Then came the war in the air. It has bombed the industrial city out of future existence. They know that already in England. The bomb is decentralizing industry, spreading the population out. They will never go back. This will mean different kinds of homes, half town, half country, with every man his acre. Everyone's dream for a little place in the country, a place to call one's own, will come true. Socialized up to the neck, the individual will have its own again under his feet. So this is the anti-urbanism nonsense that we're still seeing today. I mean, this is completely nonsense making and completely ahistorical. The vision of every man his acre, that has been the vision of European settlers in America. Like, not since Columbus, because the first vision was like, oh, we're just going to go over there and take their spices and gold and go back to Europe. But everyone who, like, wanted to set up, like, this is what they wanted to do with the land, right? This has always been this kind of, like, reactionary dream. And so at this point, like, he doesn't even want the other men in the club. Like, he doesn't want to have to deal with anybody. He's just, like, actually, like, he just hates everyone. I mean, especially women. I'm not saying, like, it's not also misogynist. But I hate these guys who are just like, cities are terrible. We need to get rid of cities. Like,
yeah, and let me just point out, the Blitz ended in 1941. And it is not, in fact, true that the cities of England, like, were just depopulated and that the demographics of the country, like, irreversibly shifted away from the kinds of people that I don't think he likes. Like, that just didn't happen. It has no relationship to reality.
No, and I mean, that's a whole other thing, is that, like, in fact, what happened is, yes, there was bombing campaigns on London and bombing campaigns on various cities in Germany. And this led to a decision, to the extent that this is still followed. And I think, you know, especially as we look at current political moment. But we decided, like, okay, we need to have these like rules of international war where we don't bomb civilian areas, right? I mean, this has been part of this conversation, but we have not seen like people leaving cities because it is too dangerous to live in a city.
In 2020, and for a year or two after, there was this consensus opinion among, the sort of people who write for The Atlantic that cities were going to be depopulated by COVID, that this was almost like the end of the urban model for culture and society. And it was just a fantasy. And I think it was the exact same fantasy.
Right. And I think in both cases, you don't see a depopulation of cities. What you do see is, especially like after the 40s and into the 50s and 60s, you have white flight, right? You do have moderately well-off white people deciding that there's too many ethnics or whatever racial group moving into cities, and they're seeing, and I think you saw this with COVID as well. Like, people talked about COVID depopulating cities, but it also had to do with the protests against police brutality in the wake of George Floyd's murder. You saw people rising up and saying, hey, this system where the cops are used to basically make white property owners comfortable by visiting random brutal violence on anyone who isn't a white property owner to keep them all in line, right? Like, this isn't going to fly anymore. And so you see these people, protesting against this. And so some people are like, oh, these cities are dangerous now, right? And it is the same exact thing, right? It is this kind of like, and I mean, and he's even kind of giving the game away here where he's like, it's not really clear what he means as the real source of the depopulation, right? Because he brings up our national population is kept going by additions from God knows where. Also the bomb. And so, of course, people left cities. And it's kind of like, well, you kind of want to de-stress that first argument maybe, because like even here, that like certain things have to be said a little more quietly. But I think we definitely still see this kind of thing today. I mean, it just makes no sense. It doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. In fact, even before I read the next excerpt, like, he's talking about, oh, we had this war and the war is challenging cities, but actually the war was a big driver of like women entering the workforce, right? Like, actually sort of the opposite of what he's saying is true. It's not that like the post-war period, he's saying like we're going to see this return to this more idyllic lifestyle where men are the king of their own acre or whatever, right? We saw the opposite, right? We saw this move into, I don't know, oh my God, it's just terrible. All right. Oh, we're talking about children now.
And we're counting them.
And the children, there must be 4 or 5 for every marriage. Every marriage. So not every family, because he knows some guys have 2 or 3 wives.
Oh, well, that's not the direction I was expecting you to go with that.
It is the only path of national safety, safety by the strength and power of our kin and kind, bred in our common thought and speech and ideal, without our own children. Oh my God. Without our own children, the wave of outside brutes from an unredeemed world will
Just a quick question. What is the topic of this essay?
The topic of this essay is whether funny women are attractive to men. Sarah, what is happening? Later we can redeem the world, but we must save ourselves first. Everybody will know that in reorganized society. The nation's children will be the first need, the main expense of government. Women who see to that need see to nothing else. That will be done in the home, for there will be no paid domestic service except contract labor by the hour from the outside. Labor as good as ladyship wearing a gold wristwatch and a domestic college degree. But the main thing will be the home, and behind it the long garden and trim grass and flower and vegetable beds, and father trying to plant a cherry tree from a book.
Sarah, what is happening? How did we get here? Like, it's kind of refreshing to see. I feel like what's happened with a lot of these writers today, like people who want to make this point today, is they've learned how to kind of like how to make these connections harder to draw. They've gotten more subtle in some ways, and they've learned lessons about like how to use dog whistles more effectively. Mm-hmm. So it's a little refreshing to see how much it really is just all about like racial supremacy, mm-hmm. and like the project of constructing an ethno state, right? Like,
I think there's much more competition today in the racist crank sphere.
So I think people who rise to the top really are the ones who know how to like say the stuff that's going to appeal to the racists without outright saying things like, without our own children, the wave of outside brutes from an unredeemed world will kill us all. Like, I think that really... like, that's really mm-hmm. what, like, all of Turning Point is about, right? Like, that's really what everything they want to say is about. But they know not to say that explicitly. Mm-hmm. Because that sounds bad. Because when you say that, normal people are like,
what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh my god. How did we get from are funny women attractive to without our own children, the wave of outside brutes from an unredeemed world will kill us all?
Well, okay, here's the thing. So we're almost at the end of this essay. We're like winding down. And I really think that he wrote this down in sort of like a racist frenzy or reverie. And he's kind of like, he's slowly realizing here at the end that he needs to like kind of pull this back on topic a little bit.
Okay. When England has been bombed into the country, America will follow. Our cities will go too. No one will live in New York any more than miners live in a coal mine. So the world will be all different. One little century will do it. Even half a century will show the full outline of it. Surviving on into this altered world will be the queerest old set of leftover creatures, as queer as our leftover Victorians, only queerer. Hell yeah.
Yeah,
I love to be the queer leftover in the major urban population.
This is the future conservatives want.
These old women will be happy and alert and self-assertive, but they will still not know how to fry an egg or repeat a nursery rhyme, for they only had 3/4 of a child each. The boys and girls of 20 will think them very funny, but my, won't they be witty when they get together and cackle. So he's kind of pulling it towards like, some women can be funny, but they're not attractive to men. Mm-hmm. And if men are attracted to those women, it's a problem with those men. Mm-hmm. Because in fact, funny women are a threat to our white future.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And we need to be like out fucking the brutes so that we can have more kids than them, so that we can live in like, it's just getting more and more like.
Yeah, I don't think there's any getting the train back on the tracks at this point.
I also like noticing this, like, oh, you know, and these women don't know how to fry an egg or repeat a nursery rhyme. And
they're also described as happy and alert and self-assertive. And
yeah,
like, clearly he doesn't value that at all.
Yeah, but also this idea of like keeping a home. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that this is also incorrect in the sense that, like, I don't know, I can fry an egg, right? Like, women living on their own know how to maintain a house for themselves. The real problem is that, like, in his vision, like, men don't know how to do this, right? Like, in his kind of idyllic vision of, like, life, you know, when we finally reconstruct good society, is that the house is running, the woman has gotten everything, the garden is going well, the food is all taken care of, and father is out back trying to plant a cherry tree, right? Like, the place... his vision for men in this is like ruling over their 1 acre, ineptly trying to do domestic labor. But also, I mean, he says here, right, there will be no paid domestic service except contract labor by the hour from the outside. Like, he's not expecting women to actually know, like, he's saying, oh, these women don't know how to fry an egg. But in fact, these are the women who do know how to fry an egg. Because in his vision, the woman actually doesn't need to know how to fry an egg, right? All she needs to know how to do is, like, have 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 babies. And we can hire, also from where, right? Contract labor from outside, like, where are these outside laborers coming from? Because I thought we all moved away from the city because there were too many of these outside laborers living there. I don't know. It's got all the contradictions that you always see in this stuff of like, oh, I hate living in cities, but also I do want the labor, but I don't want these people to feel like they actually belong here. It's just classic racism, and amazing that we got here from our funny women attractive.
Can I also just point out the conspicuous absence of a frequent figure in the misogynist literature, which is, I'm actually just noticing now that we don't see the unmarried crone here, because these women do have 3/4 of a children each, like these queer leftover Victorian types.
Right.
And so, like, these women are still getting married, but that's not enough for him. They got to be cranking out the babies. Otherwise, like, they're basically feminist trolls.
Yeah, like having 3/4 of a child each is interesting because it basically means he wants to lump childless unmarried women and women who got married but only had 1 kid, or possibly only had 2 kids, because he thinks we need 4 or 5. All into one bucket, right? Like, these are all the same.
They're underproducers. Okay,
Right,
here's the end of the essay.
So that, you see, is why I don't think witty women are attractive to men. You don't see the connection? Well, perhaps you remember Molière's play called The Doctor by Accident, Le Médecin malgré lui, where the supposed doctor, called in to diagnose a case, gets off a vast rigmarole about nothing in particular and adds at the end, and that is why your daughter has lost her speech. You see, he didn't know anything about it. Possibly it was like that. This is so funny. This is a Ben Garrison move. Like, oh, you don't think this made any sense? Well, actually, I was doing this thing from a Molière play, so why don't you consider me to be the conning buffoon, right? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with The Doctor by Accident, or sometimes it's more directly translated to The Doctor in Spite of Himself.
I am not.
It's about a guy who basically cons a family by pretending to be a doctor because he just wants to get with the daughter. Now, here's some fun Helen lore. In middle school, I was a theater kid. I was in this play. We did a middle school friendly version of it. And one of the things we used to do in my middle school plays was that if you got cast in one of the larger roles, there would be basically 2 casts, and all the smaller roles would overlap. But if you had one of the lead roles, they would switch off who played which lead role, so that, like, you would only play half the shows if you had, like, a main character, and this would get more kids involved, right? For this one, instead of having kids switch off, the theater teacher decided actually what he wanted to do was to give the whole thing a frame narrative of, like, 2 competing theater troupes, like, doing this play. And so he split up the scenes among the cast. So, like, different people would be playing the same person, like, depending on the scene. And one of the things that makes this a difficult play to do in middle school is that there's a bunch of, like, this dude falsely pretending to be a doctor in order to aggressively and sexually hit on this young woman. That could look bad for middle schoolers.
I see the issue, yeah.
So he had a brilliant solution, which is that in one of the casts, the doctor was going to be played by a girl. And then it would only be a girl forwardly and aggressively hitting on another girl.
And then it wouldn't count.
That's
that doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like that kind of shit, but when it's two women.
Exactly. And, I was cast as one of the doctors, but everyone at that time was under the mistaken misapprehension that I was a boy, and so, including me. And so, I was not in the flirtatious scenes. But all this is to say, I know this play quite well. And this is a wild pull here, because basically the character is a con artist who misdirects everyone with not even good rhetoric, totally towards just cynical personal ends that have nothing to do with the thing he's saying. So if it's like that, then if he's the doctor, then we, the readers, are the idiots, right? The whole play, it's very much a Moliere was writing kind of in the genre of older sort of commedia things. These have stock characters. Everyone involved is a clown. He's the clown who is just talking a lot, but it doesn't mean anything. And we're the fall guy reading it. If this is the analogy.
Well, that does tie a nice bow on it, doesn't it?
I mean, it does tie a nice bow on it, but it ties a nice bow by saying, oh, you don't understand why, I started talking about witty women and I ended up talking in this, incredibly racist rant about...
It's because you're stupid and I'm a pseudo-intellectual.
Yeah, because I'm being pseudo-intellectual in order to trick you, and you're stupid enough to fall for it.
Well, you see, it's all irony, except to the degree that it isn't.
Yeah, we're really seeing, I think, the development of that strategy. Haha, I'm just kidding. Unless.
I'm going to give you a little bit of biography on Stephen Leacock now, okay?
Okay.
So the source I mostly relied on was a book called Stephen Leacock, a Biography by David Legate. So this book is, to my mind, it's pretty sympathetic to him. For example, it describes him as not a misogynist. It was written by a colleague of his, and there's some kind of brutal stuff in here. So he was born in 1869 in England. The way he describes his family history is for 3 generations, they were wealthy, more or less off the back of this one guy. And then his dad was a ne'er-do-well who squandered whatever money they had. Stephen had 11 siblings. His parents were attempted colonists in South Africa. They went down there. They didn't have a great time. The farm that they were supposed to till failed. Then they went back to England, and then they had Stephen. So his biographer describes him as surrounded by relics of imperial glory and having been steeped in imperialism. So, for example, in the town in England, they had Admiral Nelson's ship in dry dock, just hanging around, and there were all kinds of apparently historical artifacts and sites of that type.
I love that guy who likes what they're doing down in South Africa and decides to go. That was how all of apartheid happened, right? It was just people were this sounds like a cool project, I'm gonna go. It was an intentional project of racist oppression. But I love how consistent this is as a type of guy through Elon Musk's parents, right? We heard about what's happening, and we're just big fans.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah, but I mean, also, they failed at that.
Yeah, I mean, and often that's what happens, because it turns out it's not a glamorous life. I don't know, there's a lot, I feel I don't want to get into the dynamics of South African apartheid, because I feel that deserves more attention than just a throwaway, but yeah, I mean, these people hate it. And it's you can see the beginnings of this kind of grievance that's disconnected from reality, because I'm thinking even now about the recent, declaration that white South Africans can claim refugee status and come to the US. And so then a bunch of them did. And then they're oh, but I didn't realize if I do that, I can't go home. It's hard to go home. And also I didn't realize that if I do that, where's the underclass of Black people who will be my servants? No one is giving me a job. I actually have to have health insurance.
I'm on the wrong end of the hyper-capitalism here.
Exactly. And so you just have this complete delusion about, oh, I'm actually a real victim here. I'm going to go to this place where they've had it figured out. And then it always turns out that those places are not running quite so well as as it seems.
After South Africa and after living in England for a while, his father makes another attempt at being a farmer, and he moves them to a ramshackle little farm in Canada. And the family hates it. So his mom is, quote, heartbroken when she sees like the collection of just like outhouses and like barely holding together like buildings that is the farm. And I really get the sense that he hated working with his hands and just like doing all this country shit, which is incredibly ironic considering what we read in that last essay. So they've been there for a while, and then their father just bails. He abandons them. Stephen goes on to become a high school teacher, and he really hates it. And so in his spare time, he's studying economics because he feels that his lot in life is to be a John Stuart Mill who does really important work in his spare time. And eventually he marries someone rich, and that gives him the opportunity to go off and do his PhD in political science and political economy. So he gets his degree and he gets a job at McGill University. So his political science work isn't entirely hated. He wrote a textbook that was like well received, but something he really wanted was to be a famous and important economist, at least in the context of McGill.
Okay, wait. So just to clarify, so he married a woman who had a lot more money and she supported him going to graduate school.
That is my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I kind of have a sense of this guy as entitled. I don't know if you're getting that.
I think you could say that. I think that's that's possibly a fair read.
In his academic position, he is not exactly respected. So like, here's something I clipped from the biography.
The pleasant situation in which he found himself in 1910 did not so much detract, as Sandwell had warned, from his position as an economic theorist, as it detracted attention from the fact that he actually was not properly qualified as an economist at all. Oh no. Dr. Jacob Viner of Princeton, a distinguished economist who served as one of President Roosevelt's brain trusters during the New Deal period, studied under Leacock. His teaching, says Viner, of what he thought advanced economics was a farce, and I'm afraid some of us gave him a rough time until the girls in the class out of pity for him, asked us to lay off. Indeed, a fellow student has said that Viner knew more about economics than did his mentor. Wow.
Yeah, brutal. Okay, at one point, his department head wrote a letter to his advisor asking if Leacock actually knew economics. And his advisor replied with just like vagueness and generalities. He just straight up dodged the question. So while he's busy like not being an economist, his humor writing starts taking off. He gets very famous. He actually becomes the top English-speaking humorist in the world for a period of like 10 years. And most of what he wrote in that vein was not so much what we just looked at, but like little slice of life sketches. Probably his most famous work is a book called Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. And so this consisted of a bunch of short stories about events in a small town. And these events all consisted of gossip he'd heard in an actual little town. He changed the name of the town to Mariposa, but the disguise was very thin. In fact, when this was originally printed in like serialized form in newspapers, the actual names of people were used, which made them very upset. A lot of the gossip he apparently got from like a town barber, and the barber got in big trouble in his community and like had to apologize. So this book is like still pretty well known in Canada, I understand. The humorous stuff was like selling great. He was getting an excellent reputation. He still had vague dreams of becoming the great Canadian novelist. So I'll leave it to you to judge the plausibility of that. In any case, the rest of his life, he just gets this like avalanche of honorary degrees, awards, all kinds of recognition. He becomes the head of his department. And then upon his death, his significance just drops off a cliff. He has some buildings named after him. He's still, a bit known as a humorist in Canada, but otherwise his influence is near zero in the long term, I think. For example, Jack Benny, who is the originator of the sitcom format in the US, actually wonders out loud, like, why was this guy just like instantly forgotten in the US? I used to be a huge fan of him. What happened? His scholarly work, basically gone and forgotten. So there's an element of disposability to this guy's life, his ambitions, and what he produced. I was reading this and I kept wondering, who's going to remember Connor Friedersdorf?
I mean, I'm thinking also of like Bill Maher, right? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think
That's
Bill Maher, because it sounds like, okay, humorist. Basically, what you have is like guy who is kind of funny, right? I mean, I'm willing to believe that, like, okay, some of his humor is like whatever, it's like competent and well done. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as he starts writing about like his politics and his understanding of like the way the world works, it just falls off a cliff. And it's like, not just Bill Maher, but like all these comedians. Like now, like before, I was thinking of this guy like, okay, this is the Atlantic pundits talk, as you said. This is the Atlantic pundits talking about how like people are going to depopulate cities, right? This is like Jordan Peterson talking about whatever, the dragon of chaos of either women or immigrants or whatever it is that is like eating Western society. But really, this is like stand-up comedy, right? This is also like a sort of the ancestor of modern day like stand-up comedians who are like convinced that like the comedian is really a latter-day philosopher, right? Like these humorists, right? Like they're the court jesters, they're speaking truth to power. And it's like, actually no, like you should stop, right? Like you should actually stick to writing your funny little stories about life in a small town and away from trying to make any kind of serious point about the way the world works, because it turns out that like your understanding is like completely detached from reality and also extremely offensive. Right? And like that's okay, because it turns out that like actually you can get away with probably writing, I mean, I'm sure there is some horrible stuff in the sketches of a small town or whatever, right? Like I'm sure that like we could go in there and we could say like, oh look, this is a startlingly bad depiction of whatever is happening, but you can kind of get away with that more as long as you're not trying to opine on like funny women are unattractive because they're actually responsible for like the racial downfall of mankind, right?
Yeah, I mean, he did get away with all this though.
Yes, but I mean,
he's hugely successful.
Yeah, I guess I'm speaking more about like imagining this might be connected to his complete fall off after his death.
Yeah, but
like,
I don't think the work of someone who's engaged in this kind of project is really intended to last.
I don't think it's intended by the like machine that produces it or by the like people who read it but I think it's pretty clear that he himself wanted to make a lasting impression, right? And I think that's part of this drive towards, like, I think this is part of why comedians do this, is like, he doesn't respect his own other humor writing enough to have that considered his legacy. So he wants to, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but getting this PhD in political economy and like trying to be like a serious economist and trying to say something about, right, and trying to say this is what society should look like it all like kind of points towards this like very entitled desire to like have an impact and not even really understand like what that impact is or care too much about it, right? But there is this kind of like drive there that I think is really common in this kind of aggrieved, entitled archetype.
He definitely has clout chaser energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second worst kind of chaser.
I don't know what you mean by that, Sarah.
Okay, let's move on to the second essay. So this has a very promising title.
The woman question.
That's always great when you see like the X question. Nothing bad ever follows from that.
This is interesting, right? Because whenever you see the X question, it's always like, the question is, do we exterminate all of them? And the answer is usually yes, right? Like, that's what that means. So, but here,
well, maybe there are different kinds of extermination.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering, like, he's going to have to handle like this sort of obvious obstacle to that program, to that political project. So let's see what he does.
Yeah. So this was published much earlier. This is in 1915. So we're right at the beginning of the period of his dominance as a humorist. Okay, so here's how the woman question starts off.
Okay, so we got a little comic here, little illustration, where I kind of can't tell what's happening. Like,
I think it's like some saloon doors.
And like it's a saloon door and a man, and it says closed, and this guy is there looking upset that he can't go in the saloon, and there's like a lady cop who's like stopping him from entering the saloon.
That's exactly correct. So
I was sitting the other day in what is called the Peacock Alley of one of our leading hotels, drinking tea with another thing like myself, a man. At the next table were a group of superior beings in silk. Superior beings is capitalized here. Talking. I couldn't help overhearing what they said, at least not when I held my head a little sideways. They were speaking of the war. There wouldn't have been any war, said one, if women were allowed to vote. No, indeed, chorused all the others. The woman who had spoken looked about her defiantly. She wore spectacles and was of the type that we men used to call, in days when we still retained a little courage, an awful woman. Come, whispered my friend. There is no place for us. Let us go to the bar. No, I said. Leave me. I am going to write an article on the woman question. The time has come when it has got to be taken up and solved. Okay, so a few responses here. So the first one is, he's doing us. Like, this is like, he's like, oh, I heard this horrible thing women are saying. I got to hear about it because I'm going to write about it. So we're really on opposing teams here, right? Like, this is why we're reading his thing, because we're trying to make a podcast on the misogynist question.
Yeah, we really are. Maybe that should be the title of this episode, the misogynist question.
Yeah, I think this episode is the misogynist question. This is also, like, this is the same scene, right? It's always like women are an obstacle to just men hanging out. And, right, the men are in the club and they're complaining about their bitch wives, or the men are in a restaurant having tea. And the women are talking and they're just like chattering inanely. And this is such a common... It immediately reminds... Okay, so recently, I forget if we've talked about this off the pod, but have I told you about the movie Sam?
No.
Okay, do you know about this movie?
Not at all.
Okay. It was going around like online a little bit because... another podcast, the Kill James Bond podcast, reviewed it. I think like people were talking about it on Blue Sky, but it's basically, it's a rom-com sort of that is like somehow a film adaptation of every not every fiction mania trope, but like it's a fiction mania movie. So it is like a force feminization fantasy movie, but it's not an erotica movie. Like, it's a mainstream produced movie. There's a lot of layers to it. And it's the classic tale of like misogynist dude gets turned into a woman and like to teach him a lesson, but very little of the movie is like him trying to... Unironically, I mean, yes, it is like literally the plot of the movie is misogynist playboy dude who hates women finds a mysterious shop owner in a mysterious little curiosity shop who gives him this magical tea that turns him into a woman immediately. Like the next morning he wakes up and he is like, and he like,
some
I guess
people have all the
she
look.
now starts going around in like a dysphoria hoodie, and immediately runs to her like gynecologist best friend and is like, you got to help me. But
you got to help me. I'm boy moding and it's not working.
Exactly. And like there's like a little bit of time of like, oh, I got to figure out like how to change back. But that kind of goes away pretty quickly. And then it becomes a thing about how like now she's falling in love with her best friend. And
I need to watch this.
It's not a good movie. But it's not like, right, when you hear like, oh, it's like a force femme movie, like it's not erotica. It is just like it's shot very much like a mid 2010s like classic kind of like comedy movie.
Yeah, that's exactly the sense I was getting from your description. It's like a romantic comedy movie.
Like one of the producers on it is Mel Brooks, because it is actually made by his son, who goes by Nicky Brooks.
Oh.
Who wrote and directed it.
I see.
And somehow is very familiar. Like, yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking on this movie, but basically, one of the opening scenes is to set up that this guy is a misogynist. He is talking to his friend, and there's these women at the next table, and they're talking, and they can't even understand what the women are saying. It's just like they're annoying chattering. Mm-hmm. And then like 2/3 of the way through the movie, after like she is kind of accepted, like, okay, I have to figure out how to be a woman, and she went to this like evil, mean gay guy to like teach her how to be a proper woman. Like that's a whole sequence in the movie. They're like back at the same bar, and this time when the women are talking, she can actually understand what they're saying, and this is like a symbol for like how she's been incorporated into womanhood, right? And
woman parcel tongue.
Exactly. And this is like, oh my God. This is just on the front of my mind because I watched this movie like 2 months ago, but it's such a trope. The like two dudes are trying to hang out and there's these annoying chattering women talking, right?
So something I want to highlight here. First off, like there's a little bit I cut out in between the two clips that I just sent you that you read as one. And one of the things they talk about there is how these awful woman is claiming that like basically every problem in society would be solved by women being allowed to vote. One of the issues that she raises is the issue of drinking. And yes, that's right.
Okay, I saw that. I was wondering when the saloon door thing was going to come in, and I knew this was around Prohibition. In the US at least, and this big movement of like, oh, we have to stop men from drinking so much.
Yes. So the women's suffrage movement and Prohibition were like tightly entwined. Part of that is just blaming the ill conditions of women who would be like beaten and otherwise assaulted by their husbands on the presence of alcohol. Vice drives abuse of women. They flee to the bar. I think there's a reason that they flee to the bar. Most of the clips I took out like don't involve the whole Prohibition angle, but like it's there in the background.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely something I think we're going to see in future episodes, because I think there's a sense like people have today of like, oh, Prohibition was like obviously silly. I think there's a lot of truth to like, it was sort of a bad political project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we don't maybe have as a society like enough of an understanding of like, first of all, drinking is really expensive. So for people who were sort of economically hard up, like there was a real worry of like, oh, the husband's going to like, right. There's this trope of like, oh, you got to make sure to like come home and give your paycheck to your wife, or you spend all the money on alcohol and then you get really drunk and angry, and you're sort of angry about society collapsing in a lot of ways. I mean, things were changing a lot. You take that anger out on your wife, right? I mean, even as we saw in this other guy's essay, like 40 years later, or 30 years later, I guess, in 1915 to 1945, talking about like, oh, the real adoring husband is the one who's going to buy presents to make up for his ill temper. I mean, there's this kind of understanding of like, oh, the ill temper coming from alcohol. It's no wonder that you get this movement of saying like, okay, then we should ban alcohol, right? If it's this, like, the thing that's incorrect there is this like assertion that like, oh, the reason men have to like all be horrible and beat their wives is because of alcohol. That's incorrect. But it's like, no wonder you then get this movement of like, okay, we should make alcohol illegal, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, there's all there's all kinds of causes that we view as problematic at best that are tied up with the women's suffrage movement and feminism of this era. Eugenics in general was like a very progressive cause, for example. What we talk about now is like sex worker exclusionism, also very progressive at the time.
Okay, so let's dig in. So we understand the woman question, and the question is, I want to have tea with my friend, and I don't want to have to listen to these nagging creatures.
No, that is table setting. We do not understand the woman question yet.
Okay. So that's just like, that's the sort of problematic that's going to lead to the question. That's then going to lead to the answer. Okay, so we're in sort of stage one.
Well, okay.
Maybe
you might be
giving
a
him
little
too much
bit,
credit.
Yeah, I think you're being
an idea of structure
generous when you're expecting this to like logically lead into.
I'm kind of like searching for something to hold on to, because I can tell like the other one started bad and got so bad, and this one is starting worse. So I'm worried about where we're going.
Well, here's where he says what the woman problem is.
The woman problem. The woman problem may be stated somewhat after this fashion. The great majority of the women of today find themselves without any means of support of their own. I refer, of course, to the civilized white women.
I'm so sorry, Helen.
The gay savage in her jungle, attired in a coconut leaf, armed with a club and adorned with the neck of a soda water bottle, is all right. Trouble hasn't reached her yet. Like all savages, she has a far better time, more varied, more interesting, more worthy of a human being, than falls to the lot of the rank and file of civilized men and women. Very few of us recognize this great truth. We have a mean little vanity over our civilization. We are touchy about it. We do not realize that so far we have done little but increase the burden of work and multiply the means of death. But for the hope of better things to come, our civilization would not seem worthwhile. Reading this, it's immediately clear why you can immediately forget about this guy, like, as soon as he passed away, right? Like, he's not, like, this is so table stakes. Like, this is just average. I was going to say, like, you could get ChatGPT to generate this, but in reality, like, ChatGPT is probably too woke. You could get Grok to generate this easily, right? This is like every clip of, right, the, like, especially the AI girlfriend Grok that, like, goes on those rants about how, like, code is more reliable than flesh or whatever, and, like, real women suck. I mean, that's, like, what this is. This is just, like, incoherent slop with, okay, they're savages, but the savages are happier than us, but they're still savages. And
I think the context of the prior essay does tell us that last sentence right there, but for the hope of better things to come, our civilization would not seem worthwhile. I don't think that's necessarily hyperbole.
No, I mean, I think he literally means this kind of golden age mentality. I mean, he's literally a return guy in some sense, right? Except, like, it's this completely incoherent desire of, like, okay, I want this sort of rural suburban life, right? Where it's like, we all live in suburbs, we all have our own acre, but then we're living this kind of farmer rural existence because that's what's going to bring us closer to the savages. But also we need to do that because we don't want to be close to the savages. And also, like, my vision of savage is, like, not actually referring to any real person who lives anywhere in the world, right? Like, there's this complete
collapse of the notion of like, oh, there's actually like all over the world all sorts of indigenous tribes that live in all sorts of different ways, right? And like, but somehow everyone in the West has this notion of like the way like, you know, huge air quotes, like tribes live or whatever, right? And which is just like, but it's not actually pointing to anyone who's ever lived anywhere. Like the gay savage in her jungle attired in a coconut leaf armed with a club. Like, who is that talking about? Like,
yeah, it's just someone he made up.
But it's not even like he made up whole cloth. Like, it's just this ambient, like, it's exactly going to appeal to the person who's like, oh, I know what you're talking about. And you're like, we don't have to specify any further, like, what time period you're talking about, where you're talking about, how this woman actually lives. Mm-hmm. Like, this works because so many people do have the, like, just vision of the savage in their head. And that's what seems just like AI generated about it. There's like no specificity. It's just all random. Like I just threw a bunch of words together. I feel like I'm not making this point very coherently, but it's just, if you actually pick apart what he's trying to say, I don't think there's actually anything he's trying to say here. Like he opens this section with the woman problem may be stated somewhat after this fashion. There's no problem here. Like, what is the woman problem? Like he opens, he's like, okay, now I'm going to tell you what the woman problem is. The woman problem is, okay, think about a savage wearing a coconut leaf, and but she's happy, and we're not happy, and our civilization, like the only thing that makes it worthwhile is the better things to come. What's the woman problem?
Okay, so I think that the woman problem in this essay is specifically economic. I think that's the main thing that's distinguishing the rambling of this essay from the rambling of the previous essay. So we're going to see all his power as an economist, all his analytic machinery put to use on this.
Okay. I'm excited to see, like, he's done graduate work in economics, got a PhD. He taught economics for a while.
Absolutely. So he's not the head of his department yet, but, you know.
His real area of expertise.
So he points out that one reason that women are able to support themselves but men aren't is because men have access to work. And in contrast,
a woman, on the other hand, has little or none. The world's work is open to her, but she cannot do it. She lacks the physical strength for laying bricks or digging coal. If put to work on a steel beam 100 feet above the ground, she would fall off. For the pursuit of business, her head is all wrong. Figures confuse her. She lacks sustained attention, and in point of morals, the average woman is, even for business, too crooked.
Okay, so I think we've really dug down to the nub of the issue here. If you put a woman high up, she will fall.
And she doesn't have the physical strength.
I don't really see any influence of Freud with Leacock, but I will point out that women being less moral was a contentious claim that Freud made, and Freud was pretty big at the time, so it was in the zeitgeist a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to the other essay we read much later, where he's talking about like, oh, you know, all the superficial changes, right? Everything that changes, everything's new about the new woman could be washed off with soap and water. It's all superficial and people are the same as they've always been. Well, suddenly, I mean, already we can find contradictions within each essay. So it's like, it's working a little too hard to like draw the two together and say like, these things written 30 years apart contradict each other. But already here we're seeing like a completely different vision of the world, right? We're seeing the savage woman and the modern urban woman are totally different. And here, right, he's saying women don't have the physical strength for these sorts of things, but he has to mean women as a result of society, because he just got finished talking about how like the savage woman is fine, armed with a club. And then he's talking about women not being moral. I mean, I think it's interesting that would be that's totally different than the way misogynists think about women today, right? Like, especially with regards to saying like, oh, women aren't good in business, right? I feel like you much more here today. I mean, maybe this is just anecdotal, I guess, because it's just based on my sense of what I hear around. But I feel like the women are too crooked to do business. You hear usually the opposite, right? Like women are the moral center. Women are
our moral betters, as if and they don't understand the wheeling and dealing that business requires, right? Which is like exactly the opposite statement.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even know if that's new or old. I mean, you can hear both simultaneously. No one is going to force him to actually become clear on that, right? But it's so nonsense.
Yeah, well, I mean, his figure of a woman is naive, silly, childlike. I mean, not to come back to the beam thing a bit too much, that although it is a little bit stunning to me, but this is how you would describe what would happen to a child if you put them on a steel beam.
Like, if you put a woman on a beam, she'd fall off. It's like, I mean, this is all happening in a world, pre-OSHA, right? Like now, we would understand that like people need to be wearing like safety harnesses and clipped into things, right? And actually part of that is because like men did regularly fall off of beams on construction sites, right? Like it turns out that like, yeah, it's really dangerous to be sitting on a beam high up in the air.
Well, I mean, have you ever seen like based accounts posting videos of like women working on an oil rig versus men working on an oil rig?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So
the men's video has a bunch of men who are just absolutely covered in shit. I assume not literal feces, but like there's dirt, oil, whatever covering them.
Yeah,
I think they're
grime.
They're bare chested, and they're just like slamming machinery around super hard.
Yeah.
And then the women, in contrast, are wearing clean clothes. They've got tucked in shirts, and they're pushing like pristine bits of like tubing around and locking them in like gently but firmly into other bits of tubing. And one of these is supposed to be real adult work, and the other one is supposed to be cut work.
Yeah, I mean, I actually know someone, very similar story. I know somebody who works at a bank doing like investment banking. And he was telling me that as part of their like sensitivity training, they had a little presentation they had to sit through about like the importance of women in the workplace. And so this is actually the sort of like the DEI kind of like, this is supposed to be, the woke spokesperson in the office telling everybody about how we need to respect women in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually said as part of this presentation that like, it's important to have women in the workplace, especially like on the trading floor, because like women are more intuitive and, more like less likely to make rash decisions and like maybe more risk averse. And it's good to balance out the like men's like, recklessness. And it's just like,
you need the yin and the yang,
Exactly. And it wasn't exactly phrased like that, but that was the meaning of what was being said. And this person was sitting there like, what are you saying right now? Like, no, the reason we need to have women in the workplace is because like equality, like there's no, like, it's not because like women's nature makes them particularly suited to like be the sort of balancing point for men. And there, the way that men are on the trading floor needs to be balanced out by like the woman's nature on the trading floor. No, it's just like, you can't be doing, and this is the DEI presentation.
Yeah, this is like this is the wokest point of the workplace.
Yeah, like this is the woke counterpoint to the normally, fairly unwoke environment at an investment bank. Okay, let's move on. Thus, it comes about that woman is excluded to a great extent from the world's work and the world's pay. There is nothing really open to her except one thing, marriage. She must find a man who will be willing, in return for her society, to give her half of everything he has, allow her the sole use of his house during the daytime, pay her taxes, and provide her clothes. This was formerly, and for many centuries, not such a bad solution of the question. The women did fairly well out of it. It was the habit to marry early and often. The house and home was an important place. The great majority of people, high and low, lived on the land. The work of the wife and the work of the husband ran closely together.
One thing that is just driving me absolutely nuts looking through these is remembering how for a significant part of his youth he grew up on this farm and he hated it. All this prescription. I don't think any of this is really prescription for him, you know?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here we're sort of, I think, makes clearer that the point of the previous passage, or 2 passages ago, the statement of the woman question, he does mean the physical care of women. And of course, that doesn't present as a problem unless you are already sort of introduced into this understanding that women can't take care of themselves because they're too top heavy, I guess. Maybe it's that their like breasts will make them tip over if they're on the beam. Maybe that's the problem. I don't know. But like,
yeah, that actually makes sense. Shit, I think Stephen's right.
But like, the woman question is like, how do you address the fact that women are totally incompetent and incapable of doing anything? Marry them so that they can do all of your stuff for you.
It's very unclear here, but he views the current economic situation, and I'm using a vague term there deliberately, as undermining this institution of marriage and causing unmarried women to multiply into a terrible like societal tidal wave. And here's his description of these economic conditions.
Then came the modern age, beginning, let us say, about 150 years ago. The distinguishing marks of it have been machinery and the modern city. The age of invention swept the people off the land. It herded them into factories, creating out of each man a poor, miserable atom divorced from hereditary ties, with no rights, no duties, and no place in the world except what his wages contract may confer on him. This is like, right, there's that, I forget who the quote is attributed to, right? But there's this idea that that anti-Semitism is the socialism of fools, right? And we're kind of getting the same thing, but misogyny instead, right? Like, there's this understanding that the modern age, which, I mean, he's sort of saying like the precursor and development of what would like then be sort of called like Fordist capitalism, is bad, right? And I think, certainly you can read all sorts of critiques of like the modern age that are exactly what he's talking about, like in, the novels of Charles Dickens. Like, this is one reason why Dickens novels are so popular, is like, yeah, people are miserable and conditions in factories are terrible. And so you get this critique of society and this critique of modernity, but it just becomes totally incoherent because instead of being able to say the actual answer, which is like capitalist accumulation and the exploitation of labor, you instead have like, oh, it's women. It's not even clear why this is related to the woman problem, I guess, other than saying like it's undermining marriage, I guess. Like, it's not even clear to me why this is related to the woman question.
Yeah, it really isn't. He's pretty incoherent. I think it's evident that the general message is that you may feel unhappy under capitalism, and in fact, that does mean capitalism is bad. But while we're treating this whole issue, don't forget that the single biggest part of the solution is actually going to be that women need to be your slaves.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we just got done talking about how women aren't suited for work. It actually turns out nobody is suited for work because it sucks working in a factory. So the solution is, men have been swept off the land. Men aren't able to control, or aren't able to have their acre anymore. So instead, as a sort of consolation prize, you should get
a plantation.
You should get a woman who you can control. And also, but it's also important that woman is giving you a lot of babies, because that's what's going to get us out of this mess. Because he's simultaneously like, we need to preserve white culture, but also our culture sucks and the savages are happier, but the savages are coming for us.
Mm-hmm. So unmarried women are now present in vast profusion. And that's a problem. But it's not a problem until this sort of like ancient demon arises.
Thus, the unmarried woman, a quiet, distinct thing from the old maid of ancient times, came into existence and multiplied and increased till there were millions of her. Is it a social contagion, Sarah?
It is.
Are we about to see
contagion.
like rapid onset spinster disease or whatever? Then there rose up in our own time, or within call of it, a deliverer. It was the awful woman with the spectacles. And the doctrine that she preached was woman's rights. She came as a new thing, a hatchet in her hand, breaking glass, but in reality she was no new thing at all, and has her lineal descent in history from age to age. The Romans knew her as a sibyl and shuddered at her. The Middle Ages called her a witch and burnt her. The ancient law of England named her a scold and ducked her in a pond. But the men of the modern age, living indoors and losing something of their ruder fiber, grew afraid of her. The awful woman, meddlesome, vociferous, intrusive, came into her own. That's fascinating. I had it totally wrong. I thought he was saying modernity sucks and working in a factory sucks, and we, the men, have been pushed out of our proper place as like tiny little feudal lords of our little land plots and are forced to work in the factory. So as a consolation, we should at least have women to do everything for us. But actually what he's saying is, because of all of that, we have forgotten how to be true and strong and brave misogynists, right? Like,
Yeah, and now we're
he's literally saying they are the daughters of the witches we didn't burn.
I know.
Like, he's literally doing like, you are the daughters of witches we didn't burn, and that's a problem. We should have burned more of you, and we should bring it back.
Absolutely. He's going down one by one and like recounting all the sort of like lib second wave feminists like figures and metaphors, and he's just like, yeah, no, that's all literally true. You are, in fact, the daughters of the witches that we didn't burn, and I don't like that.
God,
it's astonishing too, because the figure of the awful woman. So, first off, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole trying to like find the history of this term, and as far as I could tell, he just invented it whole cloth. So when I tried to find like old references to the awful woman, I almost entirely ended up on academic articles about Stephen Leacock.
Okay, so this is his like little bugbear.
Yeah.
I mean, he does do this thing which I think is funny. Like, it nowadays reads very like Tumblr to me. Of like, he'll just like capitalize something to like make it a thing, right? So he's like, earlier he's like superior being, you know, he's like, oh, awful woman. Like,
he capitalizes spectacles, the awful woman's spectacles.
Yeah, the awful woman with the spectacles. That's an archetype, right? He's conjuring this like figure that is controlling society, the awful woman with the spectacles. I want to say it's nonsensical, but it's obviously not, right? Like, what is he talking about? He's talking about women who read, right? Like, the implication is like, what do you need those spectacles for? Like, are you trying to read? Like, are you trying to like, that's men's work, right? God.
Yeah, I mean, I just sent you a picture of the awful woman.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the awful woman with the spectacles.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be the episode art.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for people who don't see the episode art, this is the woman featured in a billion triggered memes. The backstory here is a little bit sad. This is from an Alex Jones video entitled "Trump Supporters Shut Down Protesters," and this woman is just having like a pretty civil argument with an InfoWars employee, and she was having to yell because it was loud, but you know, it was like a calm thing, and they clipped one frame of her where her face looks angry, her eyes are wide, her teeth are bared, and of course she's got, you know, glasses and short hair, And then that birthed 1,000 jokes about triggered liberal women. And I kind of reject his description of the suffragettes as part of like a genuine just like continuum of feminist demons through history. But this reduction of women who care about women's rights to a singular figure is remarkably consistent between now and then.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's interesting that like he's writing this before, I mean, as you say, the second wave feminism thing, but this idea that women who were burned at the stake as witches were really that really doing that was a way of enforcing a certain economic order, right? Like this is the sort of the thesis of was it Caliban and the Witch by Sylvia Federici, and a lot of this kind of like mid to late 20th century like Marxist feminism builds off these ideas, and it's like he's kind of saying that in a way, but on the other side of it, like he's just saying out like, yeah, like it's like these women need to be stopped, but it's not even clear, like there's no explanation of why they need to be stopped other than because they're women and women are bad, right? There's no in fact, his version of a society where women can take care of themselves, again, the savages, like he admits that they're happier and it's better, and it's completely unaddressed, like why that doesn't have anything to say about maybe we should trust women to take care of themselves more in our society. It's sort of taken as a given, no, that's crazy, that would never work. I mean, it really just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think it's just presumed that women's happiness just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think he's quite explicit about that. Okay, so now he's gotten onto the topic of the suffragettes. And at this point, the anti-suffrage movement is clearly losing. Like he knows it's not going to win.
After the women have obtained the vote, the question is, what are they going to do with it? The answer is nothing, or at any rate, nothing that men would not do without them. Their only visible use of it will be to elect men into office. Fortunately for us all, they will not elect women. Here and there, perhaps at the outset, it will be done as the result of a sort of spite, a kind of sex antagonism bred by the controversy itself. But speaking broadly, the women's vote will not be used to elect women to office. Women do not think enough of one another to do that.
Well, he's not totally wrong.
This is like the most cooking that I think he's done in any of the passages we've read. And again, like the part that I have a huge issue with is the part where he says, thank God that this is the case. But I think it's unfortunately, okay, it's not like women hate other women, right? And this is the other thing, is that like, because misogyny is like a structural societal force, women do it too. This is often turned into like, look, see, even women hate other women by misogynists. And I think this is wrong for various reasons. But he's correct in that actually, like, a lot of the women who were very involved in the suffrage movement and who pushed for women to get the vote, like, joined the fascist party a decade later and were very involved in, then started pushing for, like, we need traditional societies where women are at home, right? Like this.
Yeah, Mary Richardson, famous Canadian suffragette who ended up becoming the head of the women's section of the British Union of Fascists.
Yeah. And I think, there's a whole conversation to be had here about like, well, I think part of what he's saying is correct in that, like, okay, what are women going to do with the vote? And it's sort of the wrong question, right? Because it's sort of like, well, he's also correct that, like, giving women the vote is not a way to achieve, like, other goals of the liberation of women, like, other than giving women the vote, right? Like, in order for this argument to make any sense, you'd have to think that the enfranchisement of women doesn't on its own matter. And it's, like, hard to imagine. I mean, I don't think he actually cares all that much about democracy, pretty clearly. He has like a pretty particular vision for how society should run, and he thinks it should run a particular way. So it doesn't sound like he's actually all that invested in making sure that like liberal democracy is the order of the day. So I don't want to like put sort of liberal notions onto him. But like the reason women should be allowed to vote is because women should be allowed to vote. It's not like, oh, because I think women are going to like as a class enact some kind of like feminist liberation without other things happening. Right? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, I think you pretty clearly can't enact any sort of real feminist liberation if women don't have the right to vote. It's not it's not a goal in itself. It's a precondition.
Exactly. It's not like, oh, we give women the right to vote and that is going to lead to this kind of liberation. It's like, well, first of all, it is in itself liberatory to grant the right to vote to a class of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and the whole point is that you like are actually enfranchising them into like the democratic process, like not to do like whatever, like everyone should have the right to vote because that is the thing that underwrites like the legitimacy of our government, is that like we all had the ability to vote on it. And like, even though I think there's a lot of problems with like contemporary electoralism, like the idea that, oh, you shouldn't have the right to vote, like what are you going to do with it? And especially to ask it of an entire class of people, like what are you going to do with it is sort of nonsensical. It's completely missing the point that it's like, no, the whole point is that like everyone needs to have a say in this process. And then secondly, like, yeah, women as a class like aren't going to do this, but like there should be the possibility for political engagement of women. Like it is such a like basic first step, and it's not like an engine that's going to automatically lead to other things. It's like something that just needs to happen in order for there to be any sense of like actual equality. I don't know. It just...
Yeah, I think maybe we should also emphasize that this is just raw cope.
Yeah.
I mean, he was certainly active in anti-suffrage politics before this. Like, there's no question. And so, you know, him being like, well, this isn't going to change things. It's I'm not owned material. It really is. Okay, then he pivots back to the ability of women to work.
The ordinary woman cannot do the ordinary man's work. She never has and never will. The reason why she can't are so many. That is, she can't in so many different ways that it is not worthwhile to try to name them.
I swear to God, he's one of the laziest writers I've ever read. It's
you know
incredible.
That bit of like, for $1 name a woman? I want to be like, for $1 name one reason women can't do men's work. Like, anytime someone is like, oh, there's so many reasons, it's like, it's not even worth saying, right? Like, you could say one. Like,
yeah, you know, it can't be that hard. They're teaming.
I mean, to thematically, you know, tie it into our opening segment about Charlie Kirk, it is the same phenomenon behind like, oh, you know, Gavin Newsom opining about Charlie Kirk doing politics the right way. All these people talking about the brilliance, you know, in so many different ways Charlie Kirk, you know, did this. And it's like, okay, name one of them, right? Like, give me one example. It's such a good meter for cope. Anytime someone is like, there's so many reasons it's not even worth naming one. It's like, that's like, I feel like that's going to be something we are going to see again and again, is the like, there's so many reasons it's not worth naming one. God.
Okay, so here he goes on to describe something impossible. Just moon logic stuff here. So,
the feminists, in fact, are haunted by the idea that it is possible for the average woman to have a life after that of the ordinary man. They imagine her as having a career, a profession, a vocation, something which will be her life work, just as selling coal is the life work of the coal merchant. If this were so, the whole question would be solved. Women and men would become equal and independent. It is thus indeed that the feminist sees them, through the roseate mist created by imagination. Husband and wife appear as a couple of honorable partners who share a house together. Each is off to business in the morning. The husband is, let us say, a stockbroker. The wife manufactures iron and steel. The wife is a liberal. The husband a conservative. At their dinner, they have animated discussions over the tariff till it is time for them to go to their clubs. These two impossible creatures haunt the brain of the feminist and disport them in the pages of the up-to-date novel. The whole thing is mere fiction. It is quite impossible for women, the average and ordinary women, to go in for having a career. Nature has forbidden it. Okay, first of all, I love this, like, when are we going to get the, like, this exact Tim Allen sitcom about this couple? Or, like, you know, like, this is just every 90s show is like the wife is you know, manufactures steel, the husband's a stockbroker, the wife's a liberal, the husband's a conservative, and you just watch them have dinner, right? Like,
right. This is the default.
This haunts the mind not of the feminists, because I don't think you'll ever find a feminist writing about this vision. This haunts the mind of, like, conservative reactionary comedians today. Like, I'm pretty sure if I opened up, like, Hulu or, you know, Paramount Plus or whatever, like, I could find this exact show currently being made, like, that is, like, about this. And the other thing is, like, I think reading this section, my first reaction to it is really to notice the similarity of a lot of contemporary anti-trans writing.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm not seeing it. Tell me about that.
Specifically, and I think it not only new in this section, but, like, the thing that this really is drawing up is this idea of, like, nature is forbidding it, right? And this leads to the obvious question: if nature is forbidding it, then there's nothing to worry about. Then you don't have to write this. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to do anything, right? It won't happen. So what's the point of writing a whole screed against it and politically organizing against it? And it's the same thing with, like, people who want to tell trans women, you will never be a woman. It's like, fine, then you actually don't have to worry about it. You actually don't have to do anything about it, right? There's this insistence of, like, nature has forbidden this thing. It cannot happen, but it's undermined by the amount of energy dudes like this spend explaining why it can't happen. Because if it were really a natural law, it would be a natural law and it wouldn't be a problem. And yet, like, here we are, like, liberated trans women who, like, don't have 7 children.
I have terrible news, which is that you have severely overestimated him.
Oh no.
When he says nature has forbidden it, he doesn't mean that women won't want to go in for a career, even though that's, you know, what he's...
Oh no, I understand that he's saying, like, women will try to do this and it's foolish.
He's saying that if women did this, society would end. So it's not possible.
Right, but...
because society will preserve itself.
Right, but that's sort of the point, is, like, I, you know, and you can say the same thing about, like, a lot of the people arguing about, like, oh, like, you know, a man can't be a woman or whatever, right? All these anti-trans tropes. It's like, yeah, like, of course the thing they're saying is, like, people wanting to do this are a problem and are leading to the ruination of society. But it still doesn't totally answer the question of, like, okay, if this happened, society would end. It's still saying, like, it is a natural law that women won't succeed in the workplace. Yeah, I guess it really just feels like if you really thought that were the case, you wouldn't have to spend quite so much energy against it, right? Like,
okay, well, here's our last excerpt.
Okay.
Describing why nature has forbidden it.
Okay. The average woman must necessarily have, I can only give the figures roughly, about 3 1/4 children. She must replace in the population herself and her husband with something over to allow for the people who never marry and for the children that do not reach maturity. If she fails to do this, the population comes to an end. Any scheme of social life must allow for these 3 1/4 children and for the years of care that must be devoted to them. The vacuum cleaner can take the place of the housewife. It cannot replace the mother. Oh, I see. So it's nature has forbidden it because how do we get children?
Exactly. So this is kind of the same essay as the previous one. I know you've mentioned that, but I just want to repeat it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, like, still the parallel is similar, right? Because at bottom, that is the thing people are saying when they're saying, like, you will never be a woman, is a woman is someone, right? Like, it's not an accident that, like, even so-called, you know, feminists, whatever, like transphobic feminists, like the sticking point is, like, producer of the large gametes. What's the, like, cringe phrase they're using now? Because they keep having to, like...
Yeah, it's something about large gametes.
But it's like, women are baby makers. And so you will never be a woman because in my mind, woman means mother.
Right. A woman
but
is
like not
someone
even
who
like
is intended to be a mother.
right, but not even mother in the sense of like adoptive or like
Mm-hmm.
mother who gave birth to her children, because every other version of motherhood is like a perversion of that like natural pure definition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think we're going to see a lot of our misogyny or our misogynist texts and our analysis are going to come down to women need to be making babies. Like, why are you wearing glasses, right? You don't need glasses to make babies. You don't need the vote to make a baby. You don't need a
Mm-hmm.
job to make a baby, right? Like the woman question is,
Yes.
how do we
Calm down.
secure an economic position for women?
Mm-hmm.
And he is very clear. I mean, often when we read these, I feel like we're going to have to remind ourselves, oh, they're talking about white women and they're talking about white upper class women. So he at least had the courtesy to remind us himself that that's who he's talking about, right? Because he doesn't mean like the underclass of women of color who are going to be doing all the domestic labor, right? Like the vacuum cleaner can take the place of the housewife. What he really means is like some paid, savage with a vacuum cleaner can replace the housewife.
So he closes with just like these extraordinarily blunt two sentences. Women need not more freedom, but less. Social policy should proceed from the fundamental truth that women are and must be dependent. So that's Stephen Leacock for you.
I gotta say, I'm not seeing how he made it. I guess I am seeing how he made it, but top working humorist for a decade.
It's pretty extraordinary, right? Yeah, I really wonder how much of this had to do with like social connections, that kind of thing. But I also think we can't just discount the idea that there's just a lot of appetite among the people who gatekeep, publishing, that sort of thing, for people who will just keep the production of misogyny going.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess that's a good place to sort of tie it up is like, of course, how does this guy get to be the top humor writer as well? There's a lot of money and influence behind the idea that women need to be dependent so that they can make babies. And it feels like very topical to be reading this now. Not that this idea has ever really gone away, but in the last couple of months, we've seen all these announcements about like, oh, we're going to figure out what the cause of autism is, right? And the cause of autism is pregnant women taking Tylenol. So we need to make sure that we don't do that. And we need to protect, right? Like we need to reorganize the healthcare system in the US around protecting pregnant women and encouraging women to have babies and encouraging fertility. And outside the US, even, we're seeing a lot of this kind of idea in the discourse, right? Like, it feels like there's been this new resurgence of the place for women is in the home, making babies. And, we've seen Roe v. Wade get overturned in the US, right? And this idea of like, oh, like abortion and all those things. And, that's all gone, right? We need to go back to our roots of like making women dependent on men and forcing women to have babies. And so that's never really gone away. So it's not really surprising, I guess, that...
I don't know, the Tylenol thing, it's so bizarre. I mean, even among like, anti-vax and wellness fascist types from which this is springing, like that's a pretty fringe belief. And or it was until until the president started hosting press conferences where he repeated dozens of times that pregnant women should not take Tylenol. And I think the fact that something so strange and niche is being advanced is really a sign of how pervasive and all-encompassing the attack on women's role in society has become. It's coming from every possible angle, even ones that were too weird for us to have really thought of before now.
Yeah, and I think it really also shows us something else, which I've noticed as a theme in a lot of the texts that I've been thinking about bringing into the show, is like people at varying levels of like being normal can have their brains just totally melted by misogyny, right? Like confronting this question, right? Like as soon as you bring up the specter of like, oh, the pregnant woman who must be protected because she's like furthering the race, like this is somehow a specter that has huge purchase in the minds of people who you might otherwise suspect of being normal. But then it turns out, like, you say, like, oh, can women be funny? And then you find out 2 pages later that they're talking about, like, the great masses of brutes who are threatening the very foundation of our society. And it's like, oh, that was always just below the surface. And I just needed to scratch this, like, one particular, right? I just needed to say, like, what do you think about women? To produce this, like, torrent of racial supremacy and misogyny. So I guess, yeah, that's Stephen Leacock.
Yeah, may he continue to not even live in infamy.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the longest conversation that anyone has had about him since he passed away. So,
well, I think there are academics writing about him. I know there are academics writing about him. So some of them are giving talks. They're having conversations with each other. So his memory is kept alive in that sense. But yeah, this is as close to pop culture relevance as I think he's ever going to get, is a podcast with probably 5 listeners by 2 trans women.
Amazing. Well, all right. I guess we should wrap things up then. We should plug that. I think if you are listening to this, you maybe already got it from our Patreon, but we should mention that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Odium Symposium. Currently, we don't have any benefits to subscribing other than if you want to just give us money. There's one tier and it's $5 a month. If you were listening to this and you were like, wow, the audio quality is really poor, well, that's one thing that we'll go to contributing to. We also have a bunch of ideas for, like, bonus content episodes, but no time to produce them. But that would maybe become possible if we weren't doing this for no money. So that's the plug. If you enjoyed listening to us, think about subscribing, but also it's fine if you don't. Anything else we should mention?
Yeah, it's not fine if you don't subscribe.
Okay,
I'm watching you. I'm judging you.
I will be fine with it, but Sarah may hunt you down.
Resist the worst racist remark.
The adventure of life justifies its suffering.
I don't want to see him having political succubus with goblins.
Do it live.
Is Trump going to have babies with a goblin
Do it live.
and turn against us like Darth Vader?
Do it live.
Now listen, you
right
queer,
calling
I'll
names
slap you in
and
your
let's get-
goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
I was going to have a guest speaker, but the person I had invited in died.
Some level of masochism.